Next, we have the martial artist of Node.js, I'm assuming, by the name here. We've got Charlie Robbins with Nodejitsu, right?
How are you?
Okay.
Thanks. Hey, how's it going? I'm Charlie Robbins. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Nodejitsu. We are a cloud orchestration and infrastructure company focused on Node.js. Let's see if I can figure this thing out. So, how many people do this in their organization? Develop, test, deploy. Three deceptively simple things that every industry and every company needs to do. But I'm not here to talk to you about how to build or test your apps. Let's focus on deployment, the thing that you have to do after you've built the app, figured out what it's supposed to do, gotten a team to build it, and now it has to go on some servers. So deployment happens to be one of the things that is not in the core competency of your engineers. So most companies end up going out and buying a bunch of tools in multiple languages from multiple vendors and integrating those things together via custom. So what does that mean for you? It means that you're going out and buying extremely expensive consultants or hiring extremely expensive engineers, and you're essentially just spending far too much on your infrastructure. So as you scale, your costs scale exponentially, and this just does not work for your business. Because each time you face a new problem, you're finding a new vendor or an engineer with a new skill set that are not focusing on your application and your business. Stop it. Just stop it now. Because over time, this is just not going to work. And the thing at the crux of the problem here is that none of these things were designed to work together. They're simply just not compatible without a large amount of upfront work from you. So Nodejitsu is an end-to-end solution for running applications in your cloud or ours. You can deploy anywhere with our command line application called Jitsu. Jitsu runs on multiple infrastructure providers and even in private cloud scenarios. Behind the scenes, we have a full-stack DevOps toolchain that you might be familiar with from other companies that does configuration management, provisioning, and monitoring. And so it really is essentially batteries included. We started out building a platform layer so that people could easily deploy Node.js applications, and behind the scenes built out a large layer of infrastructure software that sits between you and large layer of orchestration software that sits between you and your infrastructure provider. And we can do this on bare metal too. So if you're not using an infrastructure provider yet and you're still running bare metal, that's not a problem. So now you've got one language with a streamlined solution built on battle-hardened open source software used by the leading companies in the industry today. As far as business model goes, we can do this in a public cloud or a private cloud. So public cloud is ideal for individual developers, small teams, and medium-sized teams. In the private cloud, we can work on top of anything, OpenStack. We are working closely with Joyent. We took over their public platform as a service 2 weeks ago. And the business model associates with that. So it's a la carte pricing in the public cloud and a familiar licensing model that you've seen with other software vendors in your private cloud. To date, we've done about 100,000 deployments, which is when someone sends their code, gives it to us, we put it on a server, we start it up, we start the monitoring, we make sure that it's configured correctly. That translates to millions of modules and billions of JavaScripts. So we've been doing this for about 2 years now, and we're pretty good at it. So we're interested in talking to companies who are building clouds and deploying apps with Node.js anywhere, on any infrastructure. So in short, we want to help you be successful with Node.js.
All right. Good job.
Thanks.
You broke the record for the amount of time you gave back to the audience because you were well under the 2 minutes and change under the time limit. So we're going to start that off at 8. Unfortunately, you don't get 8 plus 2.
I don't think I need the extra 2.
Okay, guys.
So you've obviously been successful in deploying up to date, and you've got already an embedded base. What's to prevent somebody else from coming along and doing, roughly the same thing?
That's a good question. We've seen this a lot at other enterprises who are now our customers. They come out and, oh, it seems pretty simple. I'm going to build this piece of software, and I'm going to hire some guys to do it. And they do that for about 3 months, and they don't get anywhere. And they're like, wow, this is actually quite complicated. On top of that, some of the formats that we've developed for doing deployment are pretty locked in. So someone can go out and implement that themselves, but it's almost an insurmountable technical problem. And I don't like to say that because obviously someone would say just throw money at it. But when you look at the meta problem of the actual developers who are using this, there's just not the people out there that are hireable to go build that system to date. And we keep a pretty close eye on the open source community and what people are doing.
You say locked in, you really mean dialed in. You've got it all figured out in a way that'll be hard for other people to really.
It's a lot of software to build.
Yeah.
We've started out building the public platform, and we're just sort of between the zealousness of using only Node and JavaScript and not being super happy with the other offerings out there, spent 2 years building this. And we very recently just hit sort of 1.0.
Okay. Tom?
Charlie, first of all, you get bonus points. Nice pants. So,
Yeah.
for those of you who want to change.
You might want to give them your card.
Good presentation, appreciate it. Concepts not new. Companies like mine have sunk costs, incumbent talent, incumbent tools. There's arguably some overlap in some of the products we already own. Similar question to the last group. How do you get started? How do companies like Citibank or Levi Strauss or companies who are not really technology companies, where do we go and how do we get rid of those incumbents?
So I mean, since we're focused primarily on Node, there are a lot of things that other languages don't do well that Node does. And so we've seen the majority of our customers say, hey, we want to use this thing because we need it in our infrastructure. And we're coming to you because you do it well. And so again, it's very similar to what was said before. It's a small team, sort of off on the side somewhere. Mostly right now we're seeing it in mobile, dealing with a lot of large online retailers. And so, yeah, exactly, just a pirate crew that wants to do something interesting. But the really critical piece of this is that we're infrastructure agnostic. So if you're running 3 data centers, you might have each of those data centers is responsible for a different group. So if one of them is running OpenStack and one of them is running Joyent, we can sit on top of that and make that work for you. Or if you're not using an infrastructure provider at all, we can run on top of that bare metal and still give you the same platform experience.
Okay.
What's the largest implementation you've had? And what's the use case? You don't have to tell me the name of the company.
So there are some people that have pretty slow legacy APIs for their mobile apps. And it shouldn't take you 30 seconds to do something via your API. So they're implementing a sort of smart cache layer in between via Node. And I think that's going to be running on like 100 physical servers, which is 8 cores, things like that.
So you mentioned mobile apps already twice. So is it a lot of your users now pretty much in the mobile app space? And
there's been a lot of business traction for Node in the mobile space. We see that Node is good for things that are not just mobile. But I mean, LinkedIn's app is all Node. They switched over from Rails. And there's been a lot of traction there. And I think over time, with a new technology, it'll make some traction there, and then it'll branch out into other places that it does things well.
Okay. So another question. When you answered Tom's question, you talked about developers that were already using Node. So I assume it's almost a precondition that developers are looking at that technology before they would consider bringing you in, as opposed to you coming in first and singing the praises.
I was talking with someone else from Deloitte last night and said, in 15 years, what do you see? And I see JavaScript, and it's not going anywhere. So it's a language and a competency that almost every organization has, and they're really interested in switching, using that both on the client and the server, doing those types of things. And so for us, we're saying we're going to do one thing well, which is Node, and then from there, if that works, then we'll try and do some other things. I'm not sure if I answered your question there.
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
So this is not a question, but probably a comment, maybe a semi-question. So being a developer myself, I saw the PHP craze. There was a few years when everybody was doing PHP, and now suddenly everybody was doing Rails, and now Node.js, yada yada yada. I mean, what's to say that you said JavaScript will never end, and it's true, JavaScript's always there, but these development, Python is now big, it's like, so I'm trying to figure out really why I should get stuck on one, and what is the decision behind Node.js, I mean, per se, because, there are companies still running around with Ruby on Rails because they made this enormous investment the past 2 years on it, and suddenly it's like they're getting bored with it right now, and they move. Just walk me through the thought process. Why this particular environment, this particular scenario?
So, I mean, to go dig into Node a little bit, traditional I/O is broken. So you have a lot of blocking I/O. Rails does not scale at all. You know, when you talk about requests per second for a good Rails app, it's in the hundreds. Requests per second for a good Node app is in the thousands. So it's an order of magnitude faster than Ruby and Python, but you're still dealing in a familiar dynamic language that you would have seen, as opposed to going all the way to sort of say down the stack to something like C++ or Java, which has a much longer time to market. So you can iterate quickly in a familiar dynamic language, but still get the speed that you want in sort of those lower level, more established statically typed languages.
So let me ask you a question. Who's going to acquire you?
Who's going to fire us?
No, acquire you.
Oh, acquire us.
I mean, you're basically a tool company. You know, when I see it, you're a, you know, monitoring tool, deployment
Right.
tool. You walk into the tool space for me, you know. It's like, so if I were to go and buy you, and so there, because I'm sure the guys at Trinity are scratching their heads too. So I was like, dude, or was it, I don't know.
I mean, as I've seen in a fair number of other tools companies, it's people who have a larger offering and want to, because when you think about Amazon, and that coming back as a central theme here, they have a lot of ancillary services, right? And there are a lot of other infrastructure companies that don't have those ancillary services, and maybe they want them. And
so does that make your exit?
I don't want to get acquired. I like running my company.
Oh, you want to run for a long time? Okay, yeah. I get it. You answered my question.
You know, just going back to the question though about, you know, you answered the question he asked about, you know, about JavaScript. It's basically a question about server-side JavaScript versus the other languages, Rails, et cetera. And we saw server-side JavaScript show up back in the mid-90s and then like lose its traction. But, you know, Ajax sort of revived the interest in JavaScript in a big way, right? And so it's a talent issue too. Isn't that what you were getting at earlier? Which is like, you know, you can't ignore, you know, DHTML, JavaScript, HTML5, it's CSS3, et cetera. These are core components to any operation on the client side. So clearly the talent is also.
You already have JavaScript people in your organization, and you get this economy of scale for, you know, writing the same code on the client and the server. We do that at Nodejitsu. In addition to that, I mean, it's really that JavaScript failed in the 90s because it was slow, and we've got this fantastic arms race between Google, Microsoft, Apple, and Mozilla to make it fast. You don't have that in Ruby and Python. Ruby and Python are not going to get a lot better because it's, you know, a team of 20 or 30 people who are dedicated and, you know, awesome open source professionals, but they're not motivated in the same way that those multi-billion-dollar companies are.
All right, Charlie, thanks very much.
Yep, thanks.
Okay, next up we have Gretchen Curtis with Piston Cloud. Piston Cloud, company that we actually featured on Information Week's Valley View. They were on it last month. So Gretchen, microphone.
Sorry, I didn't have a pocket to put the thing in.
You're kind of like a movie star with it sitting on your back and all that. Yeah.
Great.